The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Highgrove House as Charles walked through the empty corridors. 25 years had passed since Diana's death, yet her presence still lingered in every corner of their former home. He had avoided this place for so long, but today something drew him back. The estate manager had called earlier that morning. Workers renovating the East Wing had discovered a hidden compartment behind a loose floorboard in what used to be Diana's private study. Charles felt his heart skip when he heard those words. Diana's study had been her sanctuary, a place where she would disappear for hours, writing letters to charities or working on her speeches. As he pushed open the heavy wooden door, memories flooded back. The room looked exactly as she had left it, preserved like a museum. Her favorite blue armchair sat by the window, facing the rose garden she had planted with such care. The mahogany desk where she had spent countless evenings still held her fountain pen, now dry after decades of disuse. The construction foreman, a weathered man named Thomas, stood respectfully near the corner where they had made the discovery. "Your Majesty," he said with a slight bow, "we found it completely by accident. The floorboard was loose, and when we lifted it, there was this small wooden box hidden underneath." Charles approached the spot with trembling hands. The floorboard had been carefully placed back, but he could see where it had been disturbed. "Have you looked inside?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, sir. We felt it wasn't our place. It was locked anyway." Thomas handed him an ornate wooden box about the size of a jewelry case. It was made of rosewood with delicate carvings along the edges, the same pattern Diana had loved and used throughout their home decorations. Charles held the box in his hands, feeling its weight. It was heavier than expected, suggesting it contained something substantial. A small brass lock secured the lid, green with age but still intact. He examined it closely and noticed something that made his breath catch. Their initials, C and D, were engraved in tiny letters on the lock's face. "Thank you, Thomas. Please leave me alone for a while," Charles said, his voice thick with emotion. After the foreman left, Charles sat in Diana's chair, holding the mysterious box. He could smell the faint trace of her perfume that somehow still clung to the fabric after all these years. The weight of the box in his lap felt significant, as if it held secrets that could change everything he thought he knew about their life together. He searched through the desk drawers, looking for anything that might serve as a key. In the bottom drawer, tucked behind some old photographs, his fingers found a small brass key on a thin gold chain. His hands shook as he realized this might be what he needed. The key fit perfectly. As he turned it, he heard the soft click of the mechanism releasing. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in the silence of the room. Whatever was inside this box, Diana had deliberately hidden it, choosing this secret spot where no one would think to look. Slowly, he lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in a piece of silk cloth that he recognized as part of one of her favorite scarves, were several leather-bound journals. They were small, the kind someone would use for personal thoughts and private reflections. On top of them lay a sealed envelope with his name written in Diana's distinctive handwriting. "For Charles when the time is right." His hands trembled as he picked up the envelope. The paper was thick and expensive, the kind Diana used for important correspondence. The ink had faded slightly but was still clearly readable. He could almost see her sitting at this very desk, writing his name with such care. Charles set the envelope aside for a moment and picked up the first journal. The leather cover was soft and worn, suggesting it had been handled many times. He opened it to the first page and saw Diana's handwriting, "My Private Thoughts, 1981. This was from the year they were married. As he flipped through the pages, he could see entries dating from their engagement through their wedding and into their early married life. Some pages had tear stains, others were filled with pressed flowers or small mementos. This wasn't just a diary. It was a treasure trove of Diana's most intimate thoughts and feelings during the most important moments of their relationship. He realized he was holding something extraordinary. These weren't the public diaries that had been found after her death, or the interviews she had given to biographers. These were her secret thoughts, the feelings she had never shared with anyone. The woman he thought he knew, the woman the world thought they knew, had kept these profound secrets hidden away. Charles looked around the room, seeing it with new eyes. Diana hadn't just retreated here to work or to escape. She had come here to pour her heart out onto these pages to record truths she couldn't speak aloud. The hidden compartment suggested she knew these thoughts were too precious or too dangerous to leave where others might find them. The weight of discovery settled on his shoulders. Whatever these journals contained, Diana had intended for him to find them someday. She had left the key where he would eventually look, had hidden the box where renovations would eventually uncover it. This wasn't an accident, it was a message from beyond, a final communication from the woman who had shared his life and borne his children. As the afternoon light began to fade, Charles made a decision. He would read every word, starting with the sealed letter. After 25 years of questions, regrets, and what-ifs, he was finally going to learn the complete truth about Diana's feelings, about their marriage, and about the secrets she had carried in her heart. Charles held the sealed envelope for several minutes before finding the courage to open it. His name on the front seemed to glow in the lamplight as shadows grew longer across the room. With careful fingers, he broke the wax seal that had protected Diana's final words to him for over 2 decades. The letter inside was written on several sheets of her personal stationery, the same cream-colored paper with the royal crest that she had used for official correspondence. But this felt different, more intimate, more personal than anything formal. He unfolded the pages and began to read in Diana's flowing script. "My dearest Charles," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then time has passed, and perhaps wounds have begun to heal. I am writing this in 1997, during some of the most difficult days of my life, but also during moments of great clarity about who we are and what we meant to each other." Charles felt his throat tighten. 1997, the year she died, these might have been among the last words she ever wrote to him. "I know our marriage wasn't perfect," the letter continued. "I know we both made mistakes, said things we didn't mean, and hurt each other in ways we never intended. But Charles, there are things I never told you, feelings I never shared because I was too proud, too hurt, or too afraid of making things worse." He paused, wiping his eyes. Even from beyond the grave, Diana's words had the power to move him. He could hear her voice in every sentence, see her face as she would have looked while writing these words. "These journals contain my true feelings from our engagement until now. Not the stories I told the press, not the version I shared with friends, but the real truth about loving you, about our life together, and about the dreams I had for our family. Some of these truths might surprise you, some might hurt. But all of them are honest, and I believe honesty is what we both deserved but never quite achieved." Charles set the letter down momentarily, overwhelmed. He walked to the window where Diana used to stand, looking out at the garden she had loved so much. The roses were still blooming, tended by gardeners who maintained them as if she might return tomorrow to enjoy them. Returning to his chair, he continued reading. "I want you to know that despite everything that happened between us, despite the pain and the public humiliation, despite all the ways we failed each other, there was always love. Real love. It may have been buried under layers of hurt and disappointment, but it was there." These words hit him like a physical blow. All these years, he had assumed Diana hated him by the end. The divorce proceedings had been bitter, the media coverage brutal. She had seemed to move on so quickly, finding new relationships and new causes. He had convinced himself that whatever love they had shared had died long before their marriage ended. "I hid these journals because some feelings are too precious to share with the world." Diana's letter continued. "The press wanted to paint me as either a victim or a villain, but the truth was more complicated. I was a woman who loved deeply, made mistakes, learned from them, and tried to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of our relationship." Charles found himself crying, tears falling onto the pages. He had spent decades believing he knew the whole story, accepting that their love had simply been wrong from the beginning. But Diana's words suggested something different, that love had survived even their worst moments, hidden away like these journals, protected from a world that wanted simple answers to complex questions. "In the first journal, you'll read about how terrified I was during our engagement," the letter revealed. "Not of marrying you, but of disappointing you. I was so young, so unsure of myself, and you seemed so sophisticated, so sure of everything. I was afraid you would discover I wasn't worthy of being your wife." This admission stunned him. During their engagement, Diana had seemed confident, radiant, the perfect choice for a future queen. He had never suspected she was struggling with insecurity. If he had known, he might have been more patient, more understanding during those crucial early months of their marriage. You'll also read about the nights I lay awake after our arguments, writing down all the things I wished I had said instead of the angry words that came out in the heat of the moment. Diana wrote, "So many times I wanted to knock on your door and apologize to explain what I really meant, but pride stopped me. Pride was our enemy, Charles. It kept us from being honest with each other when honesty might have saved us." Charles remembered those arguments, the cold silences that followed, the way they would pass each other in the halls like strangers. He had often wanted to reach out too, to find a way back to the warmth they had once shared. But protocol, duty, and yes, pride had kept him silent as well. The letter continued. "Our sons will grow up knowing their parents divorced, but I hope someday they can also know that their parents truly loved each other. Not the fairy tale love the public wanted, but real love. Complicated, imperfect, but genuine. These journals are my gift to you and to them. Proof that what we shared was worth something even if we couldn't make it last." He thought of William and Harry, now grown men with families of their own. They had dealt with their parents' divorce and their mother's death with remarkable grace, but he knew they still carried questions about their family's story. Perhaps these journals could provide answers that would help them understand their heritage better. "I'm leaving this box where I know you'll eventually find it," Diana concluded. "Not tomorrow or next year, but when enough time has passed for you to read these words without anger clouding your judgment. I trust that the man I fell in love with, the one who still exists beneath all the hurt and formality, will understand why I needed to share these truths." The letter ended with words that took his breath away. "I forgave you long ago for your mistakes, Charles. I hope these pages will help you forgive mine. And maybe, just maybe, they'll help you forgive yourself for what neither of us could control. All my love always, Diana." Charles sat in stunned silence as evening settled around him. The woman he thought he had lost forever had found a way to speak to him again, to offer comfort and understanding across the years. But more than that, she had left him a roadmap back to memories he had tried to forget, to a love story he had believed was permanently broken. With trembling hands, Charles opened the first journal, dated 1981. The pages were filled with Diana's youthful handwriting, sometimes rushed and excited, other times careful and deliberate. The very first entry was dated just 2 days after their engagement announcement. "February 26, 1981, I can barely believe it's real. Charles asked me to marry him and I said yes, but now that the whole world knows, I'm terrified. Everyone expects me to be perfect, to know exactly how to be a princess. The truth is, I don't know anything about being royal. I keep thinking they'll all realize I'm just a kindergarten teacher who doesn't belong in palaces." Charles paused, struck by her vulnerability. He remembered that day, how radiant she had looked during their engagement interview, how composed and confident she had seemed. He had never imagined she was struggling with such deep insecurities. March 15, 1981. "Charles is so patient with me during all these protocol lessons. When I make mistakes during the etiquette training, he just smiles and tells me I'm doing fine. But I see how naturally this all comes to him. He was born for this life. I'm still learning which fork to use at formal dinners. Sometimes I wonder if he regrets choosing someone so inexperienced." Reading these words, Charles felt a wave of regret. He had indeed noticed her struggles with royal protocol, but he had assumed she would adapt quickly. He had been so focused on preparing for their future responsibilities that he had missed the signs of her emotional turmoil. The entries continued through their engagement period, revealing Diana's growing anxiety about the wedding. She wrote about dress fittings that made her feel like a doll being prepared for display, about learning to wave properly, and about the overwhelming attention from the press. April 20th, 1981. "The photographers followed me to the grocery store today." The grocery store? I just wanted to buy some sweets for the children at the nursery school, but suddenly there were 20 cameras clicking at me. I started crying right there in the cereal aisle. How am I supposed to live like this? Charles says I'll get used to it, but what if I don't? What if I can never have a normal moment again? Charles remembered that incident. The press had been relentless during their engagement, but he had become so accustomed to media attention that he hadn't fully grasped how overwhelming it was for someone who had lived a private life. He should have protected her better, should have found ways to give her space to adjust gradually. As he read further, he discovered entries about their private moments together, times when Diana felt most confident and happy. She wrote about walks in the gardens at Balmoral, quiet dinners when they talked for hours about everything and nothing, and moments when she felt genuinely loved and appreciated. May 10th, 1981. Charles and I walked by the lake this evening, just the two of us for once. No cameras, no schedule, no one telling us where to stand. He told me about his childhood here, about climbing trees and fishing with his father. For a moment, I could see the little boy he used to be, and it made me love him even more. When he took my hand, I forgot all about being nervous. This is what I want our marriage to be like. Real moments between real people, not just a performance for the world. These tender entries revealed a side of their relationship that Charles had almost forgotten. In the years since their divorce and Diana's death, he had focused on their problems, their incompatibilities, their public failures. But Diana's journals reminded him of the genuine connection they had shared, the private joy that had existed alongside the public pressures. The wedding entries were particularly poignant. Diana wrote about her excitement and terror in equal measure. She described trying on her dress for the final time, walking down the aisle at St. Paul's Cathedral with her father, and the moment she saw Charles waiting for her at the altar. July 29, 1981, our wedding day. As I walked down that endless aisle, all I could see was Charles waiting for me. He looked so handsome in his naval uniform, and when our eyes met, he smiled in a way that was just for me. In that moment, none of the cameras mattered, none of the pageantry mattered. It was just him and me, promising to love each other forever. I meant every word of those vows. Charles wiped his eyes, remembering that moment clearly. He had indeed smiled when he saw her, struck by her beauty, and by the realization that this remarkable young woman was about to become his wife. The memory of that pure joy, uncomplicated by everything that came later, was almost overwhelming. But as the journal entries moved into their first year of marriage, the tone began to shift. Diana wrote about feeling lonely in the vast royal residences, about struggling to find her place within the family hierarchy, and about the pressure to produce an heir. October 12, 1981, I'm pregnant. Charles is over the moon, and so am I. But everyone keeps talking about hoping for a boy, hoping for the next heir. What if it's a girl? What if I disappoint everyone right from the start? Charles says it doesn't matter to him, but I see how much the courtiers care about producing a male heir. I feel like my worth is already being measured by something I can't control. This entry broke Charles's heart. He remembered his joy at learning about Diana's pregnancy, but he had been insensitive to the additional pressure she was feeling. The royal family's emphasis on succession had made her feel like her value was conditional on producing the right kind of child. As he continued reading, Charles saw how Diana's morning sickness became a metaphor for her larger struggles with royal life. She wrote about throwing up from nerves as much as from pregnancy, about feeling overwhelmed by official duties while dealing with physical discomfort, and about longing for her mother during this important time. November 8, 1981. Charles tries to be understanding about the morning sickness, but he has so many obligations. I spend hours alone, feeling terrible physically and emotionally. I miss my flat, I miss my friends, I miss feeling normal. Is this what the rest of my life will be like? Beautiful prisons and golden loneliness? The phrase golden loneliness struck him deeply. Diana had coined a term that perfectly described what many royals experienced but rarely acknowledged. The isolation that came with privilege, the way duty could separate you from genuine human connection. The entries about William's birth revealed Diana's transformation into a mother, her fierce protectiveness, and her determination to give her son a different kind of childhood than royal tradition typically allowed. June 21st, 1982. William is perfect. When I hold him, nothing else matters. Not the photographers outside the hospital, not the pressure to be a perfect princess, not even my problems with Charles. This little boy needs me and I need him. I'm going to make sure he knows he's loved for who he is, not what he represents. Charles closed the first journal, overwhelmed by the complexity of emotions Diana had experienced during what the world saw as a fairy tale beginning. Her public image as a happy, confident young bride had masked a deeply thoughtful woman, grappling with enormous challenges. More than that, these pages revealed that despite all her struggles, her love for him had been genuine and deep. The woman he thought he had lost had been there all along, recording her true feelings, waiting for the right moment to share them with him. Charles reached for the second journal with a mixture of anticipation and dread. This one covered 1982 to 1985. the years when their marriage began to show serious cracks. The cover was more worn than the first, as if Diana had handled it more frequently during times of stress. The early entries were filled with the joy of new motherhood, but also revealed Diana's growing frustration with the restrictions placed on her as a royal mother. She wrote about arguments with palace staff about how William should be raised, her insistence on being hands-on rather than leaving everything to nannies, and her desire to give him normal experiences. September 3, 1982. Charles and I had another argument about William today. I want to take him to the park where other children play, to let him experience life outside palace walls. Charles worries about security and protocol. I understand his concerns, but I don't want our son to grow up in a bubble. I want him to know how ice cream tastes when bought from a truck, how grass feels under his bare feet, how other children laugh and play. Reading this, Charles remembered those disagreements. At the time, he had seen Diana's ideas as naive and potentially dangerous. Now, with decades of perspective, he could see she had been fighting for their son's emotional well-being in ways that were ahead of their time. The entries revealed how their different approaches to parenting became a source of tension. Diana wrote about feeling undermined when Charles would override her decisions, about courtiers who treated her like an inexperienced child rather than William's mother, and about her growing sense that she was fighting a system designed to keep her powerless. January 15, 1983. I suggested we take William on the upcoming tour to Australia. Charles looked at me like I had lost my mind. "It's not done," he said. "Royal babies don't travel on official tours. But why not? Why should our son be separated from us for months at a time?" When I pressed the issue, Charles said I was being emotional and unrealistic. "I'm not emotional, I'm being a mother." Charles paused, remembering this conversation vividly. Diana had indeed fought to bring William on that tour, and eventually they had made history by traveling with their baby son. The public had loved seeing the royal family together, and William had thrived during the trip. Diana had been right, but he had made her fight for something that should have been a natural parental decision. As the entries progressed, Diana began writing more about feeling excluded from Charles's inner circle. She described dinners where conversation flowed around subjects she hadn't been educated about, meetings where decisions affecting their family were made without consulting her, and social gatherings where she felt like decoration rather than a participant. March 22, 1983, another dinner party with Charles's intellectual friends. They discussed art, philosophy, and politics while I sat there smiling and nodding. When I tried to contribute something about my work with children's charities, the conversation quickly shifted back to topics I don't understand. Charles didn't notice how left out I felt. Sometimes I wonder if he married me for my mind or just because I looked good in photographs. This entry cut deep. Charles realized how his social circle, filled with people who shared his educational background and interests, must have felt intimidating to someone much younger, who hadn't had the same privileges. He had assumed Diana would naturally find her place, but he hadn't made enough effort to include her or help her feel valued for her own unique perspectives. The journal entries about Harry's conception and birth revealed both hope and strain. Diana wrote about hoping another baby would bring them closer together, but also about feeling physically and emotionally exhausted from trying to be perfect all the time. November 12, 1984. I'm pregnant again. Charles is pleased, though I suspect he was hoping we'd wait longer. I'm hoping this baby will heal some of the distance that's grown between us. Maybe with 2 children, Charles will see the importance of spending more time at home, of being present for our family, rather than always focused on his duties. September 15, 1984. Harry arrived today, another beautiful boy. Charles was wonderful during the birth, so tender and supportive. Holding our new son, I felt hopeful about our future. 2 perfect children, a husband who loves me in his way, and important work to do. Maybe we can make this work after all. But even during these hopeful moments, Diana's entries revealed underlying problems. She wrote about Charles's increasing involvement with his environmental and architectural interests, time that took him away from family life. She described feeling like a single mother despite being married, managing 2 young children while Charles traveled or attended meetings. February 10, 1985. Charles left this morning for another week of engagements. William asked why Daddy has to go away so much. How do I explain that saving old buildings is more important than bedtime stories? I know Charles's work matters, but so does being a father. I'm exhausted from handling everything alone. These entries showed Diana's growing resentment, but also her attempts to understand Charles's perspective. She wrote about researching his interests, trying to engage with his passion for architecture and organic farming, hoping to find common ground that might bring them closer. April 3, 1985. I've been reading about Charles's Dutchy home farm project. His vision for sustainable agriculture is actually fascinating, even if I don't understand all the technical aspects. When I mentioned this at dinner, his face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Maybe if I can learn about the things he cares about, we can reconnect. But Diana's efforts to bridge their differences were often met with what she perceived as condescension. She wrote about Charles explaining things to her in ways that made her feel stupid rather than included, about his surprise when she offered insights that showed she had been listening and learning. May 20th, 1985. I suggested some changes to the children's garden project that might make it more appealing to families. Charles looked surprised that I had thought it through so carefully. "That's actually quite good," he said, as if intelligence was something unexpected from me. "I'm not just a pretty face, Charles. I have ideas too." The most painful entries dealt with Diana's growing awareness that Charles still had feelings for Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana didn't write about this directly at first, but her journal entries showed increasing anxiety about Charles's friendships and his emotional distance from her. July 8, 1985. Charles spent another evening on the phone with someone, a long, private conversation in his study. When I asked who it was, he said, "Just a friend," in that tone that means I shouldn't ask more questions. I used to be his friend, the person he talked to about everything. When did I become someone he keeps secrets from? These entries revealed Diana's pain, but also her attempts to save their marriage. She wrote about planning special dinners, suggesting romantic getaways, and trying to recreate the intimacy they had once shared. Her efforts were heartbreaking in their sincerity and devastating in their apparent failure to reach him. August 30th, 1985. I arranged for us to have dinner alone tonight. Just the two of us like we used to. I wore his favorite dress, had cook prepare his favorite meal, and asked the staff not to disturb us. For a moment it felt like old times. We talked about the boys, laughed about William's latest mischief. But then the phone rang, and Charles excused himself for just a moment. 20 minutes later, I was eating alone. Charles closed this journal feeling overwhelmed with regret. Diana's words painted a picture of a woman desperately trying to save a marriage while feeling increasingly isolated and unheard. Her efforts to connect with him, to support his interests, and to build a family life together had been genuine and persistent. He had been so focused on his duties and his own emotional needs that he had failed to see how hard she was fighting for them. The third journal covered the period from 1986 to 1992, the years when their marriage publicly unraveled. Charles hesitated before opening it, knowing these would be the most painful entries to read. The leather binding was more cracked, and several pages showed evidence of tears that had fallen while Diana wrote. The early entries showed Diana finding purpose and identity through her charitable work. Her writing became more confident as she described her involvement with AIDS patients, homeless shelters, and landmine victims. For the first time in her journals, she wrote about feeling truly useful and appreciated. March 12, 1987. I visited the AIDS ward again today. When I shook hands with patients without wearing gloves, the nurses looked shocked. But these people need to know they're still human, still worthy of touch and compassion. Charles says I'm courting controversy, but some things are more important than avoiding difficult conversations. Charles remembered this period, when Diana's humanitarian work had garnered both praise and criticism. At the time, he had worried about the political implications of her actions. Reading her words now, he could see the moral courage that had driven her decisions and the way this work had given her a sense of purpose that their marriage hadn't provided. June 8, 1987. A young man at the hospital died today. He couldn't have been more than 25, the same age I was when I married Charles. His mother held his hand as he passed away, and I thought about how love is the only thing that really matters at the end. Not titles, not protocol, not what the newspapers say, just love. These entries revealed Diana's growing emotional maturity. Her work with suffering people had taught her profound lessons about life's true priorities. Charles could see how these experiences had shaped her into the compassionate figure the world came to love. But he also realized how far apart they had grown during this crucial period of her development. The journal entries became more explicit about the problems in their marriage as Diana's confidence grew. She wrote about confronting Charles directly about his relationship with Camilla, about their explosive arguments, and about her decision to stop pretending everything was fine. September 15, 1989. I can't do this anymore. I asked Charles directly if he loves her, and he couldn't look me in the eye when he said no. His silence told me everything. I've been competing with a ghost for years, trying to be someone I'm not to win back someone who never really belonged to me. I'm exhausted from fighting for a marriage that may have been over before it began. The pain in these words was overwhelming, but Charles also noticed something else: Diana's growing strength. She was no longer the insecure young woman begging for scraps of attention. She was becoming someone who demanded honesty and respect. Diana wrote extensively about her struggles with bulimia during this period, revealing how she had used food as a way to control something in her life when everything else felt chaotic. Her descriptions were heartbreaking, but also showed her gradual understanding of the connection between her eating disorder and her emotional pain. November 3, 1989. Another episode today after Charles canceled our dinner plans to attend a meeting. The binge and purge cycle is my body's way of screaming about pain I can't express any other way. I know it's destructive, but in those moments it's the only thing that makes the emotional pain stop. I need help, but who can I trust with this secret? Charles felt sick reading these entries. He had noticed Diana's erratic eating patterns but had attributed them to the pressures of maintaining her figure for public appearances. He had never realized she was struggling with a serious disorder that was directly connected to their marital problems. The entries about their official tours revealed the enormous strain of maintaining their public facade while their private relationship crumbled. Diana wrote about smiling for cameras while feeling dead inside, about the exhaustion of pretending to be happy for the sake of the monarchy. February 20th, 1992. Another successful tour according to the press. Charles and I smiled and waved and played our parts perfectly. The crowds love us together. If they only knew we barely spoke privately for the entire trip. I'm becoming an expert at fake smiles and rehearsed gestures. Sometimes I wonder if the real Diana is disappearing entirely, replaced by this performance I put on for the world. But within these dark entries, Charles found moments that surprised him. Diana wrote about times when their old connection briefly resurged, when they would catch each other's eye during a public event and share a moment of genuine understanding, when their shared love for their children temporarily bridged the gulf between them. July 4th, 1990. William fell off his bicycle today and came running to both of us, crying. For a moment, we were just parents comforting our child. Charles held him while I cleaned his scraped knee, and we worked together seamlessly. In that instant, I remembered why I fell in love with him. His gentleness, his genuine care for our boys. These moments are rare now, but they remind me that somewhere under all this pain, we still care about each other. The entries leading up to their separation were filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. Diana wrote about finally accepting that their marriage couldn't be saved, but also about her fears for their children's future and her own uncertain role in the royal family. December 9th, 1992. The Prime Minister announced our separation today. It felt surreal, sitting in different rooms while our marriage was discussed in Parliament. But alongside the sadness, I feel something I haven't experienced in years: relief. No more pretending, no more trying to be someone I'm not, no more competing for Charles's attention, with memories and obligations that will always come first. What struck Charles most powerfully was Diana's continued expressions of love for him, even during their worst periods. Despite her anger and hurt, she consistently wrote about caring for his welfare, worrying about the pressure he was under, and hoping he would find happiness. January 15th, 1993. Charles looked exhausted during the boys' school play today. The separation has been hard on him too, and I hate that. Despite everything, I want him to be happy. He deserves love even if he can't find it with me. I hope someday he'll have what we couldn't give each other. The journal's final entries showed Diana preparing for her new life as a separated woman, but also reflecting on what their marriage had taught her. She wrote about forgiveness, about the complexity of love, and about her hopes for their children's understanding of their parents' story. March 18, 1993. I'm learning to forgive myself for the ways I failed as a wife. I was so young when we married, so unprepared for the realities of royal life. I made mistakes, said hurtful things, allowed my pain to make me cruel sometimes. But I also tried harder than anyone will ever know to make our marriage work. Both things can be true. Charles was struck by her emotional maturity in these later entries. The angry, hurt young woman had evolved into someone capable of seeing their relationship with remarkable clarity and compassion. May 10, 1993, I want William and Harry to know that their father is a good man, who was trapped by circumstances just as much as I was. Charles never wanted to hurt me. He was trying to do his duty while managing his own emotional needs. The system failed us both, but that doesn't make either of us villains in this story. The journal ended with an entry that took Charles's breath away. June 30, 1993. Today would have been our 12th wedding anniversary. I spent it looking through photo albums, remembering the good times alongside the difficult ones. We had real happiness, Charles and I. It may not have lasted, but it was genuine. I hope someday, when the anger has faded and time has healed the worst wounds, we can remember the love we shared. I hope our sons will see that their parents tried to love each other well, even when we failed. Charles closed the third journal with tears streaming down his face. Diana's words had shown him a version of their story he had never fully understood, one where both of them were struggling human beings doing their best under impossible circumstances, where love had persisted even through their worst conflicts, where hope for healing had survived even the end of their marriage. The woman he had thought he lost forever had been there all along, understanding him better than he had understood himself, forgiving him before he had learned to forgive himself. Her final gift to him wasn't just these journals. It was a new way of seeing their shared past, one that honored both their love and their humanity. Charles reached for the final journal with hands that no longer trembled with anxiety, but with anticipation. This last volume covered 1994 to 1997, the final years of Diana's life when she had found her voice as a global humanitarian and begun to heal from their broken marriage. Opening entries showed a Diana who was rediscovering herself outside the confines of royal marriage. She wrote about her newfound freedom to choose her own causes, her growing confidence in public speaking, and her determination to use her platform for meaningful change. January 8, 1994. I gave a speech today about landmines without having to clear every word with palace officials. It felt incredible to speak from my heart, to say exactly what I believed needed to be said. This is who I was meant to be. Not just a pretty face in photographs, but someone who can actually make a difference in the world. Charles felt a surge of pride reading these words. He had watched Diana's transformation. During these years with a mixture of admiration and regret, proud of what she was accomplishing but sad that she had had to leave their marriage to find this version of herself. Diana wrote extensively about her work with landmine victims, her trips to Angola and Bosnia, and her determination to bring global attention to issues others preferred to ignore. Her passion for this cause was evident in every entry, and Charles could see how this work had given her life new meaning and purpose. August 15, 1997. Walked through the minefields in Bosnia today. The local people were so brave, showing me the reality of what these weapons do to innocent families. A little girl, no older than Harry, lost her leg when she was playing in what she thought was a safe area. I held her hand and promised her that people far away would hear her story. This is why I exist, to be a bridge between those who suffer and those who have the power to help. But alongside her public triumphs, Diana's private entries revealed ongoing struggles with loneliness and her search for genuine love. She wrote about various relationships, her hopes for finding someone who could love her for herself rather than her title, and her dreams of a quieter life away from constant scrutiny. March 22, 1995. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever find someone who sees Diana the woman rather than Diana the princess. Every man I meet is either intimidated by my position or interested only in the fame that comes with being connected to me. I want what Charles and I never quite managed to achieve, a partnership based on genuine understanding and mutual respect. These entries showed Diana's emotional growth and her increasing ability to analyze her own patterns in relationships. She wrote about learning to trust her instincts, about refusing to settle for less than she deserved, and about the importance of being complete as an individual before sharing her life with someone else. September 10th, 1996. The divorce is final. I felt sad signing those papers, not because I wanted the marriage back, but because it represented the death of so many dreams. The young woman who walked down the aisle at St. Paul's believed in fairy tales. The woman I am now knows that real love is more complicated but also more precious than any fairy tale. As Charles read these post-divorce entries, he was struck by Diana's lack of bitterness toward him. Instead of anger, her writing showed a woman who had found peace with their shared history and was focused on building a positive future for their children. November 12th, 1996. Charles and I had coffee today to discuss the boys' Christmas plans. It was the first time we'd been alone together since the divorce, and I was surprised by how natural it felt. We talked about William's school performance and Harry's rugby matches. Just two parents who loved their children. Maybe this is what we were always meant to be, better co-parents than we ever were spouses. Diana wrote movingly about her relationships with William and Harry during these years, her efforts to give them normal experiences despite their extraordinary circumstances, and her hopes for their futures. Her love for them radiated from every page. April 20th, 1997. Took the boys to see a movie like any ordinary family today. William is becoming such a thoughtful young man, always concerned about others' feelings. Harry makes everyone laugh with his mischievous sense of humor. They are the best thing Charles and I ever created together. Whatever mistakes we made, we got this right. The entries about her relationship with Dodi Al-Fayed were surprisingly thoughtful and measured. Diana wrote about finding companionship and kindness, but also about taking things slowly and being cautious about bringing another person into her sons' lives. July 15, 1997. Dodi is sweet and attentive in ways I'd forgotten men could be. He listens when I talk about my work, doesn't try to change me or manage my image. It's refreshing to be with someone who accepts me as I am, but I'm being careful not to rush into anything. The boys come first, and I won't introduce someone into their lives unless I'm certain about the relationship's future. The final entries were dated just weeks before her death. They showed a woman who had found contentment with her life, excitement about her future humanitarian work, and deep satisfaction with the mother she had become. August 20th, 1997. I keep thinking about legacy lately. Not the kind the history books will record, but the real impact of a life. If I died tomorrow, I hope people would remember that I tried to use whatever gifts I had to help others. I hope William and Harry would remember a mother who loved them unconditionally and taught them to see the humanity in everyone they meet. The very last entry, dated just 3 days before the car crash in Paris, took Charles's breath away. August 28, 1997, had the strangest dream last night. I was back at Highgrove, sitting in my old study, writing letters to people I love. In the dream, I was writing to Charles, telling him all the things I never said, how proud I am of the father he became, how grateful I am for the good memories we share, how much I hope he finds happiness. When I woke up, I felt peaceful in a way I haven't for years. Maybe it's time to let go of old hurts and focus on the love that remains. Life is too short and too precious to waste on regret. Charles sat in stunned silence as darkness fell completely around him. Diana's final words to him had been thoughts of forgiveness, gratitude, and hope. She had found a way to transform their painful story into something beautiful, not by pretending their problems hadn't existed, but by choosing to focus on what had been good and meaningful in their relationship. As he carefully placed the journals back in their wooden box, Charles felt a profound shift in his understanding of his own life. For 25 years, he had carried guilt and regret about their failed marriage. Diana's words hadn't erased the mistakes they had both made, but they had shown him a different way to hold those memories. Their love story hadn't been a fairy tale, but it had been real. It had produced two remarkable sons, had taught them both important lessons about love and forgiveness, and had ultimately prepared Diana to become the extraordinary humanitarian the world had mourned. Walking out of Diana's study for what he knew would be the last time, Charles carried with him not just the memory of their shared pain, but the gift of her final understanding that love, even imperfect love, even love that doesn't last forever, has value that transcends its failures. Diana had found a way to forgive them both, and in doing so, had set them both free. The hidden truth Diana had left for him wasn't a revelation about secrets or scandals. It was something far more precious. The truth that their love had mattered, that their story had meaning, and that forgiveness was possible even across the years that separated the living from the dead. In her final gift to him, Diana had transformed their ending into a new beginning, their shared sorrow into shared grace.